Hello, my friends. We're back. I just got back to LA last night. It's kind of chilly today in Malibu. Got my beanie on. What's going on, everybody? What's happening? Get Jon on here in a second. He's back from New York. Grab him real quick. How's everybody doing? What's up? Hey, man.
What up?
How are you?
Doing all right. How you doing?
Yeah, doing pretty good. I got back fairly late last night and didn't realize it was going to be cold here. Apparently it's been cold.
Yeah, just a little bit.
And you're back from New York too. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I am. I was just to play tennis this morning, and I get to the court, and it's raining. It's like, why is it raining right now? Complaints of LA complaints. Hilarious.
Was it actually raining this morning?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, damn.
On the east side. Yeah. Went up to Glendale, where Nathaniel, my manager, lives, and it was raining as soon as I got there. So I turned around, came back, and rode and stretched instead.
This is bullshit. We live in LA. It's supposed to be beautiful and sunny all the time.
I know. How was family time?
That was amazing, man. It was amazing. Yeah, great to get a little break. Everybody up there is vaccinated, so I went up and got to spend some time and chill out and be at home, and that's always a great thing. Spending time with family, spending time at home. How was New York, man? Yeah, whatever.
It was good. It was great. New York's great. Walking around was great. Food was great. Seeing family was great. Seeing a couple of friends was great. Yeah.
But you're only there for a couple of days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna go again in,
it's like 5 days, 6 days. Really?
In a few weeks, so we'll have to do a live when I'm actually in New York.
Oh, you're going to New York?
Yeah, I'm gonna go to New York. No, I'm gonna go to New York in like 2 or 3 weeks and do a session or two, do some meetings, and just see a bunch of friends. So I'll be fully vaccinated by then. So
sick.
Get out of plane and go do the thing.
For some reason today, the chat is the size of my entire screen. So just letting everybody know, send your questions in because I can see them loud and clear.
Yeah, it's funny the chat with I think they're still working out some things in new Instagram live because the chat last week was all over Keen's face. It looks fine to me now with you, so there must be some settings and things. What's going on, man? What you working on? We got questions and stuff. I figure we just kind of check.
I know. I don't have anything specific to talk about. I'm hoping that something sparks. I did just install a new microwave this morning because I've never owned a microwave before, and I learned a little secret that if you want to serve, keep your plates warm, you put a tiny bit of water on the plate, stick it in the microwave, you get a warm plate to serve your food on.
That's great.
Which is really cool. I have a warmer on my cooktop, and that's only enough for one. And I try to do like 4 plates and whatever. But someone's asking, what did I order at the super crazy restaurant you posted? What super crazy restaurant? One super crazy restaurant was a tasting menu, so I didn't order anything. And they brought out a bunch of things. There's 14 courses.
Food questions in this week, and some of them asking about your New York trip. One asking about. Go ahead.
Oscar, 2 Michelin star spot in Williamsburg. Chef Frederick, Swedish chef. Inspirational food, very delicate, very elegant. Mostly fish and vegetable driven, and flavors I've never experienced from any said fish or vegetables. And then there was one venison dish at the end before the desserts that was also incredible and texturally almost like a duck leg and falls apart. But best dish at the Michelin restaurant was the langoustine. It was a nice thick langoustine, and then a broth kind of foamed up with the shell in it. So the flavor of the broth was very oceany, very rich of the sea. That was definitely my favorite, I would say, of the 14.
Somebody asked, one of the questions today was, what's the secret to a great Tadiq?
Time, love, and care.
I love asking you about food because when you talk about it in a very similar way as you talk about mixing. with the same level of attention and detail. And, you know, there's so much of what we do in these lives and these conversations that people want to know technical answers and what plugin do you use here. And some of that stuff is useful and it's good for people to know that. But really what I think we're always trying to get across is the level of focus and commitment is going to get you further than anything else. There was actually a great conversation on the Discord just earlier today. I've been telling people, we have a little section on the Discord about songwriting, which you and I don't talk a lot about, obviously. And I'm going to have some more people that do more songwriting on some of these lives, but there's some discussion there. And somebody watched the Ed Sheeran documentary and they were like, it seems like he just writes things that he loves. It's actually not that complicated. It's like, yeah, you just write 2 or 3 songs a day for 10 years and love it, and you'll get really good. It's really about a commitment and an excitement and a mentality and a consistency that's more important than any plugin or any secret or anything like that.
Let's bring that back to what the secret to the great Tadiq is exactly that. It's that kind of that anticipation. It's kind of the feeling when you know that a song is great and you have to get out of the way of it and let it express itself, and do as a mixer, kind of just do these little moves here and there at the right times and assess. And that's how you express through a great Tadiq. I mean, the anticipation of flipping it and seeing what's going to happen every time is what keeps you, perfecting and crafting this. I mean,
can you tell people what a Tadiq is?
Yeah, so it translates to bottom of the pot in Farsi. It's the rice that sticks to the bottom of the pot and gets all crunchy and crispy, and when you crack into it, it makes a sound. It's like, oh, it's the best. I actually did one on Saturday where I used sesame, toasted white sesame, and dill with saffron and lebni, which is a condensed strained yogurt, kind of sour-ish, and it crisped so beautifully. That was on Instagram on Saturday. If anybody saw
amazing.
Saw that.
I think I hit you up too. I was like, that looks incredible.
That was one of the better textural ones. It's always different. It never comes out the same. Consistency is at a certain level at this point, just because I've probably done like 50 or so of them. But I don't know. It's my favorite food. I don't even eat rice. I'm on a ketogenic diet most of the time. So when I eat rice, I want it to be that fucking good. And it's a special dish. It takes a lot of time. It's a kind of a 2-hour process, soaking rice overnight, minimum of 6 hours, and taking it as much starch as you can out of it. So each grain of rice is separate. That's really key. That's really important if you're doing a Tadiq and saffron rice. If you're doing a tachin, which is like a stuffed version of it, you can put anything inside you want, whether it's herbs, chicken, lamb, nuts, whatever. That can be a little less washed because it's kind of like a rice lasagna, and you can keep it kind of squishy if it needs to be. But the dill polo is big. That's amazing. Yes, it is. But you want every grain of rice to fall apart and separate. Yes, opposite of risotto. Exactly. Very much not risotto. Yes. Anyway, so that's I've been craving cooking. I cooked enough food for 10 people for 3 people on Saturday. So I've had a bunch of leftovers, which I just had before I came on. So
that's awesome, man. Yeah, I love when the conversation is it gets you excited about something, or me too, I suppose, that so much of what we do really is about getting excited and repetition and just focus, and not so much about the details in terms of what you're using at any given time, but just the overall process of it.
I should bring up that on the New York trip, the flip side, which I talked about on my podcast on Conversations the other night, we kind of went into it a little bit with Rory. The most profound dish of the whole trip was a charred leek dish. Very simple, very rootsy, just burnt ass leek with sheep curd, good olive oil, salt, and pepper. And that was the most profound dish. It was at a restaurant called Via Carota in the West Village that if you look up on Instagram, like so many chefs, world-renowned chefs follow them. It's kind of like one of the New York Italian trattoria spots that just super low-key, white dish with a fucking thing on it, not fancy. And the leek, this rooted, just this grounded, simple vegetable cooked over fire, this kind of primal, back to human origin, was the most profound dish that I've had in a while, actually, not even just on the trip, but just in general, where I ordered so much food. For one, I was having Yeah, Bavette is great too. Bavette is the same chefs, same owners. That's their French bistro. Anyway, so I wound up, ordering way too much. I was there by myself, and I wanted to try a bunch of things, and I didn't finish anything else because the portions were quite large for one person. But I finished every bite of the leek because that was the most special thing I've tasted in quite a long time. And that was following the Michelin star restaurant. And Chef Frederick, I love you and I love everything you did. It was so nice to meet you. But the leek was otherworldly. Yeah.
I don't know if this will spark a conversation. I think but it may just be an interesting thing. I posted this a while back, and I can't remember who. It was a repost from something. Maybe I heard it on a podcast. I don't know. They were talking about that when you go to a fancy restaurant, oftentimes it's a good choice to order something that seems the most simple, that looks almost boring. Like, if you go to an amazing restaurant, they have all these fancy looking things, but if you order the meatloaf, it's probably going to be the best meatloaf of your life. Or you've ordered just the leeks and just says, charred leeks, it's probably going to be the best charred leeks, because there's something about when you get to a certain level that the preparation, ingredients, simplicity, just like mixing, just like music, just like songs, that the high level people do simple things brilliantly. And that's almost, I almost aspire to that with all the stuff that I do, that the more simple, it's like when people are starting out mixing, producing, and I was the same way, you kind of learn all the tools and you try to do everything. And then once you learn a ton of different ways to do it, then you start realizing, oh, I have all the crayons in the box. I shouldn't use all the crayons. How can I do this simply? How can I put, you talk about it when you're mixing, you don't have, 25 EQs you reach for. You have a couple of EQ plugins, a couple of saturation plugins, and that's kind of it. And you go from there. I don't know if you speak on that a little bit. And
I actually just added one. Well, actually, the journey could be discussed for sure, but I actually just put a new plugin into the, I tested it out here and there over the last couple of months, and now it's kind of it's on every session thing, and I figured out how to use it. It's the Mike Dean Gain Station plugin by Acoustica, his collaboration with them. It's fantastic. It's a little glitchy and buggy, which is kind of annoying, and I tend to stay away from these like kind of CPU glitchy plugins because I like the flow. Like I've had more crashes in the past 3 days than I've ever had because of this damn plugin. So if Acoustica's on this, check that out. It crashes all the time, but I love the plugin and it's working. So I'll just use it and I'll commit it like it's a piece of analog gear.
What does it do?
It's a saturator. It's a clipper. It's a distortion plugin. It's a very comprehensive distortion plugin. You could route. It's basically, it has a preamp with MIKE for different intensities of distortion. It has a Pultec EQ with a 60 or 100 boost, I believe it is, and then a 3K or a 10K boost, 2 bands. And then it has a clipping. And it has a spreader, but I'm not using the spreader. I don't like spreading stuff if I don't have to. But then it has routing. So where you put everything in the chain, it has 4 routing selections. So you can't choose the router any way you want, but it gives you 4 comprehensive routing kind of opposites that you would want, whether the clipper's in the beginning or the clipper's at the end, or if it's in the middle. And so you can kind of imagine what I'm getting at. Yeah. I've been using it subtly, and it's really magical on bass. It's really nice on live bass. It's great on 808s too. But it's really nice. It can get overdone and sound too much like Mike Dean and just everything's distorted. It's like, that's not what I'm trying to make my...
There's already a Mike Dean.
Yeah, exactly. But you can hear him in the plugin, which is really cool. There's definitely awesome identity in there. The clipper has DEAN for levels of. Anyway, so I've incorporated that. But when you're talking about the journey, man, I had every plugin ever made on my computer for a decade. Yeah. And I'd be like, oh, what do I want to use to compress today? What do I want to use to EQ today? And I'd be like, it's the same thing. Yeah. There was a couple, the Cambridge EQ and UAD sounded different to me than the EQ7. Could I mix a song with the EQ7 if I didn't have UAD plugged in? Absolutely. And that kind of pushed me towards the minimalism in tools. And I just, have you tried L-Ray? I have not, because I don't I don't know what L-Ray is, and I'm not sure if I need another thing, but I'm open to these new things to be thrown my way. But I just like, it takes a lot to come into regular use because I have another tool that will also do the thing because I know the thing I'm trying to achieve. And that's what we talk about a lot in this podcast is that, like, what are you trying to do? Do you know of a thing, of a tool that gets you there? Use that thing so you can go on to another idea. So you don't overcook the mix. So you don't overcook the thought in your head. And that's kind of where I sit and why the journey has taken me to about 5 to 10 plugins that are regularly used.
I love that you use the word overcooked, given how much we talked about food. The analogy is totally correct. It's overdoing stuff is really, really easy because everybody has all the tools. What do you, aside from it's easier to not overcook, it's easier to correctly cook a mix. What else do you find to be the benefit of having a smaller number of tools? Like deciding that you're only going to use 5 or 6 plugins, with the exception of some, if somebody's using something crazy on a session, it's their thing and it's in there, whatever. But you've decided to minimize the tools you're using. How does that benefit you?
By alleviating space and bandwidth, so I could use that intellectual bandwidth to make the right decisions. So
it's not just time, but it's brain power. That you've eliminated part of the process. It's workflow. It's
okay.
It's
so what should we? Let's pick a. Would you rather? Would you rather spend time deciding what EQ tool to pick, or spend time deciding on what needs to be EQ'd to get the mix to sit right? Like
it's exactly, yeah. I love it.
I love this. This is really good. Serban often starts with L-Ray in front of his chain, and Jason recently called it mandatory. If Jason Joshua says that something is mandatory, I'm going to go with it's not mandatory. I'm going to just play the flip side. No tool is mandatory besides the DAW that you work in. So Pro Tools, if that's what you use, is the only mandatory tool for a record to sound like something worth listening to.
I love that.
Sorry, that's just too much.
No, sorry at all. And we've said it many times before. Big fans of both of their work. They've both made amazing sounding stuff, but disagree that anything is mandatory.
CLA vocals is mandatory.
Yeah, CLA vocals on everything is mandatory.
But it's really the bandwidth. It's really the getting out of the way of what needs to happen to the record, not to the individual sound because someone told you to use this thing. That's just, they're not the same thing. I'm sure there's some gray there. Like, yeah, someone tells me to try this L-Ray thing. It might work on the next, I don't really compress, but the next thing I choose to want to compress. Like, maybe that's magic and maybe that's going to make the vocal pop more, but I just know I want the vocal to pop and be controlled and dynamic and energized and active and exciting and subtle and whatever it needs to be. Like, I'm going to use those words and then get there with a tool that I know quite well, that I've practiced. I think once you start practicing with a few tools and you know everything about them, that's going to be more beneficial than one thing from one tool and this thing from that tool. I always remember Tony seeing 8 to 10 plugins on a chain of something I was mixing with him, that maybe I was starting it, he was going to finish it, and he would just bypass it and just see what things were doing. And then he'd leave like 2 of them on. Be like, why are you doing that with that after that? Just do it all with this. I was like, oh, right. That's great. It's simpler. Like, why do I have to do that? I used to think that all of these things had different characters to them. And I liked the 2K boost on this, and I liked the subtractive on this. And I still have these things kind of, but they don't make the song better.
It's a very different world than how the first 60 or 70 years of recording engineers were trained, where different boxes really sounded drastically different. Today with plugins, you can, if you have a basic EQ plugin, whether it's the basic Ableton plugin, the basic Logic plugin, the basic Pro Tools plugin, most other EQ plugins, with the exception of some that are doing really specific harmonic saturation things, you're going to be able to get a great result out of any of these tools. And I had a thought, and I don't know if I believe this. I think I do, but I'm going to say it out loud and see what you think about it.
Yeah.
If you as a mixer, producer, whatever, you as a record maker have a tool that you use a lot, but you don't know the limits of every feature of the plugin, if it's one of your main things, you have room to grow as a record maker.
Yes.
If you know, and by the way, I say that knowing that there are plugins I use and I'm like, I don't know if I've ever tried that part of it. And that's a failure on my part. I should know every bit of every tool, and you'll find out that most of these plugins have a wide range of things that they do, and you don't need 25 different versions of it. You don't even need five different versions of it.
I would say that anybody on this or that hears this, it's like you taking, was it 60, 90 days to do an hour a day of meditation, just to see what happens.
Yeah.
I would do 60 days. Let's go 30. Let's do a month. Let's say 30 days where you only use 10 plugins.
Yeah.
And learn the fuck out of those 10 plugins. And do
10
that.
is a lot too. I thought you were going to say like 5.
No, it goes quick. It goes quick.
Yeah, it's
it goes
true.
quick.
Different kinds. Yeah.
Yeah, between saturations, compression, dynamics, EQ, loudness tools like clippers or limiters on your mix, spreading tool, like all the reverbs, they go pretty quick. It's like 2 per genre, delay, chorus effects. Like I think I have 10 that are for all of that. But do that for 30 days and then maybe try the next 30 days, or sub out 5. Maybe you don't
reach for another thing. If you're not getting what you want, find the limits of the plugin. Use the Valhalla. Exactly. The Valhalla delay has 5 different modes and 3 different eras and all kinds of. Just see if you can get everything out of it. And if you can't quite get everything out of it, see if you can print a version of it and chop things and just like go to the limits of everything that you want to try to achieve.
So that just sounds like fun to me.
Yeah.
And I did that intentionally, and it was fun. Do I use the H3000? Yeah, all the time. Awesome. I love the H3000. Yeah. And I was going to say something. I was thinking about the overcooking analogy. It's like thinking about this fish that I've been making, this black cod that I've been getting a fair amount of wows from homies on, and I learned a technique from a chef in Santa Barbara at this restaurant called Barbareño that I adore. It's like one of the most special meals on the West Coast that I've had. I've been maybe 3 or 4 times. Went for my birthday, my 35th birthday this year. Drove up there. They do this black cod. They do it all different kinds of ways. But basically the technique is you marinate it for a really long time, like 8 to 12 hours, and then you cook it for 8 minutes. It takes 8 minutes under a broiler to cook, and it's the most delectable fish that you've ever put in your mouth every time. Consistency. So thinking about a great mix, thinking about a great song, just like we talk about this, I basically wrote a not great, not well written paper on the idea of listening down, listening through things, letting things marinate. The song will tell you what to do, but if you discover what to do and you're spending too much time thinking of the tool to do the thing that you're supposed to do, you're going to forget the thing that you were supposed to do. And I'm saying that from experience, from years past, where I would be like, oh, what was I? Oh, I picked my LA3A out of a list of 300 compressors. And then I was like, wait, what was I even going to do with that? And it happened all the time, right? And like
spending brain power on choosing which version of the same thing is just a waste of time.
Yes, it's just a waste of time. And marinating that fish and cooking it quick gets the job done every time. Because I know that the broiler is the technique to get this done. I know that a little lemon juice, some rose water, and some salt is going to get the marinade done. Every time. So if you want to impress someone with a dish and you want to give them this textural experience that they've probably not had, that's the move. And it works every time. And it feels special. And that's what you want your clients and the artists to get from that. You want to hear something that they didn't expect from you. Like I just sent back this mix yesterday that I can't wait to hear back on, where all the great artists, great vocalist, and all the harmonies kind of were up the middle. But the reference point was really obvious to me. It was very kind of Phil Collins. And I left the lead really dry, and every background vocal I put an H3000 on. You know, like I really went for it to this ad lib that's just occupying this really wide space. And I want them to come back and be like, whoa, yes, this is what we were going for. Didn't even know how to do that. Or they're going to come back and say, hey, put it back up the middle and, you know, make it sound simpler, which could be the case. But this is the intention. So I didn't decide that by fucking around with tools. I decided that by listening to the record and going, this is clearly this reference point, but let's see what that sounds like now in 2021. Like, I haven't heard an artist that has this type of voice, perform like this, shout like this, musically shouting, like you get an ad lib on a record like a Phil Collins record. I'm going to put it in that space and we'll see how it translates, right? It's like, but that's from listening. It's not from fucking around. I know the tool that will get me to that thing if I want to get that thing. And that's from practicing and mastering it and understanding the H3000.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think that maybe the last thing on this topic, there's two little things. There's that classic, that proverb, a bad carpenter blames his tools. The flip side of that is, I think what we're talking about, there's a great video that anybody can Google. It's on YouTube. That's like Dave Grohl plays Kids drum kit, and it's I think he's doing a radio appearance or doing something, and there's a few cameras around, and it's somewhere, I think in Northern Europe or somewhere, some heavily accented guy, and he signs this Kids kit, and they're like, hey, do you want to play it? And he's like, I think I might break it. And they're like, just play it. And he gets on a untuned little Kids drum kit, and he just plays better drums than I could ever play. And you just go, it's not the tools, it's the guy doing it. And I think the point of that is not that, you know, if you're not Dave Grohl or if you're not Jon Castelli, you won't make a good mix. But the point is, it's something much larger than what EQ you're using or the perfect tool or the right saturator or whatever. If you're good at what you're doing, if you spend the time, which is what we always talk about, not shortcuts, but spend the time and really, really learn your tools and put in the hours, it's not going to matter what EQ plugin you use. Like you can make great sounding stuff. I give you, you know, one random EQ, one random compressor, one saturator, one limiter, one reverb, one delay, and you'll make a better mix than I would make because you put in the time. And ultimately it really is about learning your tools and really going deep on them. The other thing I wanted to say is that there are a lot of specific questions. I know even somebody in the chat here was asking about rates and about a lot of business stuff. I will say there's a lot of amazing discussions going on in the Discord. There's working engineers and working producers that are having great discussions and advice about building home studios and how to deal with clients. And, you know, Kian's on there giving lots of advice. I'm on there. So for a lot of the more specific questions about things like that, the Discord is a whole community of people that'll be better than John or I giving advice on what a working engineer should charge for us. Like, you know, you and I we can give macro thoughts about that, but that's part of the reason we're building the community on the Discord is that there's great people over there that can give you thoughts. So people asking those sort of questions, please go on the Discord. There's lots of great people on there. Okay, well, we got a few questions that I think could lead down interesting places. This is something that, I mean, we won't get specific on it, but something you and I talked about when we had brunch a couple weeks ago. Somebody asked, and I actually didn't write down who it was. I'm sorry. What's the best way to treat STEM requests before paperwork when you know from experience it's a bad idea? I mean, if you know it's a bad idea, then you probably don't do it. But
you answered your own question.
How do you deal with? It's a sort of a larger question about how do you deal with the artist hitting you directly. Maybe you have a relationship with them, or someone saying, hey, can you send this, but you don't have the paperwork. There's a lot of ways to go with that conversation. I don't know how deep we want to get into it, but something you and I have talked about a bit too. Even at quote unquote our level, we deal with this a lot where somebody hits me direct and says, hey, can you send the stems? And it's like, we don't have a deal in place. And once I send all of my work to you, then all of a sudden I don't have leverage, even though of course they can't legally put something out with that. But there's just like, you know, where do you put down the business line versus whatever? I don't know if you have thoughts off of that.
I do. 9 times out of 10, no matter what transaction is about to happen, my manager is involved from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, I've developed, and you have developed, tight relationships with artists and producers that just kind of send things through text. And depending on how many songs we've done historically in our relationship, I'll just jump on it right away if I have the time, or if I just am inspired by it, I will. But the first text or the first call is to Nathaniel, my manager, to be like, hey, I'm doing this, sort it out with whoever. And it normally gets sorted out. Where at brunch, we talked about something that is a little bit out of character that occurred. I will get paid for the 2 songs that I mixed for an artist directly that I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. My guess is that it's a budget thing and they went somewhere else to finish the rest of the project. From the sources that I've gathered.
We'll talk about this after too, because I have some updates on that one too. But
and I'm not going to hold it against the person, but I'm not going to fast turn around, hook up that person ever again. It will never happen. So I learned the hard way. But based on the fact that we've mixed 12 songs over the past year and a half, 2 years together, I thought that we had some sort of loyalty and open communication. If you don't, let's come at it 2 different ways. This is the 2 ways I could see it. One, it's a budget thing, and the label, look, maybe you haven't had as much success as that they'd hoped, so they're not willing to spend or invest as much money anymore. Will come to me and say, hey, this is the circumstance. We've done this. Like, where are you at to negotiate? You know, are you super busy right now? Like, what's your circumstance? How can we make this work? I can offer you more points, less of a fee up front. Like, let's negotiate. Or the other is, actually, I want to go a different direction sonically on this project because I'm doing more of this thing, and I think this person might fit the bill better than, differently than you. I don't want to even say better.
Yeah.
Both of which are conversations that we would wish would happen, because nothing is to be taken personally. Yeah. But lack of communication and avoidance of potential conflict is bridge burning. And I think we need to be careful with what bridges we burn and how we burn them, because that person just lost trust to me, someone that would bend over backwards to do anything that they wanted to in the beginnings of and throughout their career, because I'm really was involved and highly engaged in what this artist was doing. So they just lost out on an opportunity to build really deep trust with someone that cared a lot about their project. And that's fine, because now they don't need to take that personally, and I'm not going to take it personally. That's just the fact of the matter. Yeah. So they're bumped from that priority. And that's okay, because now there's room and bandwidth for someone else to come take that space, and I'm open for it. So we just have to not take things personally, but also understand what happened and what potentially caused this to happen. Yeah. And you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I have a few thoughts about it, and I think you and I have the benefit of, I think between us, almost like 30 years of experience doing this stuff. I still make mistakes on both mistakes. Like, it still doesn't go right when there's conflict on both ends of the spectrum. Sometimes I've pushed too hard on the business side and said, look, it's in the lawyer's hands. We have to do that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk business with you. And then sometimes, this is a small percentage of the time things don't go well. It's very small, but sometimes I've gone too far that way, and I should have just said, hey, let's sit down, let's have a conversation, let's come to an agreement, and then we'll put it in the hands of the business people. And then sometimes I've talked directly to the person and let that go too far, but there was no business back end, and I get screwed and don't get paid and do a bunch of work. And I am confident that both of those things will happen again in the future. There's no perfect way. Oh, and then the third thing is, there are times when there's no right answer and things just aren't going to go right. Things are just going to implode, because projects implode, especially when you're dealing with recording artists and people that are like my favorite people in the world. That's why I do what I do, is I feel like I can be a bridge between recording artists who are much more volatile and like the record label head or the manager. I love being the bridge between those two, but sometimes it just doesn't work. And that also is important to recognize, that it's it's important to take care of your money and make sure that you know that this is what if you're trying to do this professionally, or if you do it professionally, that this is your livelihood. And if somebody's like, hey, we're friends, you don't have to respond with, I know we're friends, but this is my money. But you do have to make sure that you're holding on to the thing that helps you pay rent or that helps you do whatever. And you talk about it as well. It's like, there's a value to the job of the mix engineer that you feel responsible for when you're saying, I don't want to undervalue my profession, even though it would be okay, but it's important to say, hey, this is an important job and I want to be able to value this for my whole industry. There's we have some offline stuff to talk about this with the project that we're talking about, but this happens with big labels, big managers, whatever. Like, things go haywire all the time. Everybody's trying to hustle. Everybody's trying to get an angle. It doesn't mean that they're all bad or evil or everybody's, some insincere hustler, but there are negotiations. And that's why when you get to a certain level, you want to have a manager and an attorney, or probably the first thing is an attorney anytime you're doing a deal. And it's hard to know exactly when you go, I need to let my attorneys handle this, because that's just, that takes away so much from what, especially those of us that I get into a room with a new artist who just signed a deal. I want to be their mentor and I want to be their friend and I want to help them understand, making a record for the first time. And don't worry about all those business people. This is a safe place. But then at some point, if they want to use my work, they're going to have to pay me for it. And hopefully business people go take care of all of that. But, when those buffers go away, it's an imperfect business.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no one way it works. This mix I just talked about with the H3000 and the chorus that I'm just referencing, I mixed it yesterday before I kind of got the thumbs up from my manager that they agreed on a deal for the 4 or 5 songs that I'm doing, because I just loved the song and I wanted to jump in. But I didn't send it till he gave me the thumbs up.
Yes.
At the end of the night, he was like, "Oh yeah, we're good. You can send it to manager and A&R and whoever." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's tight." Like I'm not going to send it otherwise. This circumstance we're talking about, I did text directly because I just haven't gotten screwed on the project yet. So I didn't think there was a reason to. But yeah, I most of the time I'm making sure that things are at least in motion and then we're agreed on a rate. I don't need paperwork every time to get started on a mix.
Yep.
Production, I don't know if I would send, if I was a producer, I don't know if I would send stems to a mixer without the beginnings of paperwork from the label.
I basically never do. I mean,
I wouldn't.
But I never do for new things, but this is why we talk about, and you talked about it earlier, compound relationships, ongoing relationships with a manager, a label, or a relationship that my manager has that I don't have. And they go, hey, I have a long-standing relationship with this person and they have a deadline. We're going to get the paperwork sorted out. I'm like, great. I love this song. I'm ready to get into it. And I just start working and I may finish the production before we get the exact deal terms, because I trust the process. And that's one of the many reasons it's so important to have long-term relationships with people. I did that on this James Arthur project where the first singles come out and some other songs are coming out, where I've worked so much with that system. I actually hadn't worked with James before, but worked with the A&R guy, and he was at Psycho before. And I just have a long-standing thing. And there was like an acoustic version that just came out of the mix, and he's like, it's last minute, can you do it? And I say, of course, because we've made a lot of records together. And
it's going to get sorted.
It's going to get sorted. We're going to get it all figured out. But that's not always how I react. There's projects where I've been screwed by the manager before, and so I go, the money needs to clear the account before I start.
So this is the interesting thing. The other angle that I come at it, which you're talking about, is besides the trust of the team, I just want to strike when inspiration hits me. Like if I hear a record, I'm a creative. I'm not trying to only make money, right? So like I hear a great song, I know what to do to it. I want to just jump in. So it's okay. It's like it's setting up, I guess, parameters in your life to be most optimal, and open to the creative flow to hit, or whatever to hit. If you're waiting on paperwork, and then on that Thursday the paperwork comes in and you're not feeling creative, then you didn't give your best to that record on that Thursday because you weren't feeling right on Thursday and you were feeling great on Tuesday. Like, do the record when you're feeling right most of the time, and then you're going to get more investment from others in you later because your work is better. If you're only doing it for the money, I mean, no one listening to this, if they're doing it only for the money, I don't.
But these are important things. It's important to say that
it is
you
a
do
business,
things for the,
but it's not the impetus for why we do this. And I'm always trying to remind myself of that, which is very easy to do because I feel very lucky to be doing this and getting paid well for it.
Yeah.
But really, I just like music, and I take myself seriously, and I value the engineer. So I will not mix a song for less than a certain rate. And I know we were going to not talk about this just because it's on the Discord.
No. Let's talk about it. I mean,
but I don't want to devalue the engineer. So I think there's a certain, at my level, I think there might be like 3 or 4 levels of engineer. And I think I'm in like the 3rd tier level of engineering, of mixing engineering in like price.
With one being the top?
No, 4 being the top.
4 being, okay, yeah, I was gonna say you're okay.
Yeah, level 1 through 4, and I would rather do something for free than for lower than a certain rate. And you have to remember that people talk, right? So if someone finds out that you did this, they're gonna want you to do it for that. Then you just devalued yourself and everyone else below you. Yeah. And that's kind of my pushback on that. I think always be working. Always be involved in projects, but at a certain point, don't even take any money for it, because then it becomes pro bono. Then it becomes a gift. Maybe take back end, and because you're investing in believing in a new artist. We have to value our role, and the more we undercut each other, the less value we have, and we all become commodity engineers and not artistic craftsmen, engineers that have something to say and a voice to add to the record. So that's all I really have to say on that. I'm sure there's great information in the Discord.
Well, it's just a lot of people who are actively working that will give a lot of thoughts. And somebody asked in here, how do you work through the more logistical stuff with indie artists when there's no label involved? And the truth is, it's just hard. It's hard to figure that out. I've done sort of like email agreements with people. You kind of just have to trust people and come to an understanding. It's hard to have, like I said,
contracts.
Have
get a simple producer contract.
There are attorneys. There are lots of music attorneys out there. I mean, you can even just find them on Instagram. But like music attorneys that will help you put together a simple contract. I'm sure there's resources online. I don't know a lot about the state of the world that way because I've had basically a full-time attorney for 17, 18 years now, since I was the end of my teens. And so I'm not in that space. Again, the Discord, I think, would be a great place for people to talk about that. I know there's people on there working with more indie bands and things like that, but it's hard. And the truth is, like I said, even at quote unquote our level, it's still tough, and it's still everybody's, I still work with independent artists and new people, and the agreement, the good news is that if you're working with someone and writing songs with them or producing things with them, legally it cannot be put out into the world and monetized without an agreement that compensates you, because fortunately, at least in the US, copyright law says that if you are the creator of something, you are a part owner. And so what a deal is when I produce a song is basically to say, they're going to give me money and I'm no longer an owner of it. That's essentially what a producer agreement is to say, you contributed to the composition if I'm a writer, or to the creation of the master recording as a producer. And by signing this document, they give me X money and X royalty, and I declare that I am no longer an owner of it, and they have the right to do whatever they want with it. So legally, even if you're working with indie artists, you still have to come to some sort of agreement. They can't monetize something without your permission. So at least those that are sort of starting out, that you start from that place. Again, I obviously don't know the copyright law around the world. I assume it's similar things in a lot of countries. But I think the Discord, I think, is a good resource. A lot of people will be talking about this stuff there.
Let's jump to another question.
Jump to another thing. All right. I like this one. This is sort of a creative thing, and this is something I learned very much from Eric Valentine, and we can get into it. Zach asks, can you guys talk about downbeats and transitions? And I think he's talking about sort of in the mix process. But I think mixing, production, all of that, I think I thought it was like a secret magic trick cheating to realize that you can automate up downbeats, you can push transitions. Like that's where most of my automation and focus goes when I'm finishing a song, is on downbeats. Actually more than transition. I mean, downbeats and transitions are similar things.
Yeah.
But the idea of making downbeats hit, and we've also talked about limiters and loudness and things like that, and things being out of phase because there's an extra hit on the downbeat. Downbeats, I think, are the difference between like somebody who's producing demos and like sort of a producer writer, and then like the real finishers. I think downbeats is one of those places that are overlooked by people that are, I would say, more amateur or less great at what they do, and mix engineers as well. Like I've actually, when I've sent things to mastering or sent things to mixes and then I hear a downbeat and it just doesn't quite hit as hard, I go, that's the most important thing. It's the downbeat of the chorus. It needs to feel just right. I don't know. You want to speak on that a little bit? Got any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm super into transitions. Tony used to ask me to work on transitions specifically on songs. Like that would be like one of the ways he'd bring me in. Be like, yo, smooth this out. You're good at that. Because it's more of a producer
like the balances
ear.
are good. Yeah, like the balances are good. The mix is good. The vocal sits right. But let's make. Yeah,
I mean, I talk about this a fair amount. I talk about blocked out, 4-bar, 8-bar music all the time. So I think that the transitions between sections and the way you can float effects over or cut things hard or however to make the next section feel a bit more surprising, like almost like you haven't heard it yet, but it's a lot of the same elements, if not all the same elements, is what we're talking about. Is that it's that surprise element. It's that active element that something comes up a little too loud and here or downbeat, because you can do it on the beat 4 before and do nothing on the downbeat, but you feel the downbeat differently than you felt it on beat 4.
It's not just adding, but it could be reducing before.
It could be reducing, and that's what I was about to say. Is I'm more of a reducer than like an automate up on the downbeat. I actually don't remember the last time I automated. Like, look, my kick drums fit like right at the edge of clipping, like most of the time.
Yeah.
So I have very little headroom to automate up that kick drum on the downbeat of the chorus so it hits harder.
Yeah.
When I think about choruses hitting harder, I'm thinking I tend to feel it more in the mid-range and the upper mid-range, and this like energy excitement that is a little bit of a push. So a lot of the times that's taken care of in the production, right? Like an element comes in or the vocal hits a certain register and hits the verb just right, where that's, I mean, the song to me is what should activate the downbeat. So I'm not thinking automation, but I might do something there. But to me, it's more of a reduction into that downbeat of the chorus,
contrasting the downbeat with whatever comes before it. Whether the automation up of the downbeat, which Eric Valentine to me is the master at that. If you listen to like Gives You Hell, if you listen to the All American Rejects, a huge song. The last thing that I worked on with Eric, which was years after I was out of his studio, I did a song with Keith Urban called Horses that I wrote and produced, and then Eric came in and finished the production, recorded some live drums, and then mixed it. Mm-hmm. The downbeat of the chorus in that song just has this like explosive widening, and it's not just maybe automating a little bit because it's live drums. It's not samples, so you don't have that same sort of consistency. You're sort of pushing the whole feel of it, but also the widening of the guitars. I mean, all these little things that amplify on the downbeat just sound fucking explosive. And so it could be widening, could be reducing beforehand, could be, you pulled off the sub of the kick drum just a little bit in the pre-chorus, so then you open it up in the chorus and all of a sudden it feels full. There's so many techniques for that. I mean,
there were really big tricks in the 90s with rock bands. Nirvana comes to mind, where like all the verses would be a mono guitar, drums.
Smells Like Teen Spirit. Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Exactly. Yeah. All of a sudden the guitars are everything so wide. The chorus, that's arrangement. That's like that's more conceptual. How do we make this feel bigger? If the verse is super wide and the pre-chorus is super wide and the chorus is super wide, we don't have that width contrast. We don't have that height contrast if no cymbals hit on the downbeat, or there's no vocal verb that sprays out that give us that thing, or whatever it is. And it can be the opposite. It could be the chorus is really bright. I mean, the verse is really bright, and then it comes really dark and focused, more like a Billie Eilish kind of concept, where they go to chorus and it's just like, kick drum and a vocal. but the verse has got more piano and musicality to it. It's like the anti-chorus, quote unquote, in a lot of ways. And when people were doing these records where in the EDM pop time, there were these like, you build to you think it's a drop, and instead it's like a super minimal kind of repetitive chorus, trance-like thing that was happening. And no actual song comes to mind, but that was such a thing for like 4 years. And this is just the game, right? This is the game we're playing, which is how to make things feel surprising, how to make things feel new in linear style music creation, because we're all doing it. We're all in it. We talked about on our last episode of Conversations, like this denatured music that we're kind of creating that, you know, we don't have much time to go deep into it, but if anyone wants to go deep into it, we can listen to our last episode that came out. It's, it was my favorite episode because we kind of been going into this heart of the matter that Spider and I and Rory and Michael and some others have been kind of discussing, which is like, well, there's a long lever to pull if you can find that emotive, you know, real context-based, time-transcending emotional music that like Billy has captured it. That's like the example that comes to mind in the modern. It's so different 100%. Than everything else. It's so compelling. Like there's a long lever to pull there. And what would it take for that to occur? And we dive deep into it for a good hour.
That's great.
And because I'm not trying to take away from the hypnotic repetitiveness of what makes pop music work. I just don't think people are emotionally open to hearing much like, you know, too abstract production style on these kind of records. And I think that's okay. I think we're a bit denatured, but also there's a lot of other things that you can do with your time now. As I kind of understand, I kind of hate it. And I think that I wish that people were more of a fan of music than the idea of what music exists for now. But at the same time, if that's what's going to be there, I and my peers and my cohorts want to make your journey through the linear song a little more interesting.
I think people will also find when you dig into songs, big record, the one that comes to mind is Rihanna Work. You know, the first like 5 times I heard that song, I'm like, okay, it's kind of samey and kind of, you know, it's nice. It's a nice thing. It sounds a bit like a demo, but it's a vibe. And then by like the 7th or 8th time I heard it, I'm like, this is my favorite song. It's so subtle. It's such a vibe. And there are great, like, it's mostly in the vocal performance, but a bit in the track as well, where it's actually has great arcs to it. They're just subtle. And that, you know, maybe back to the beginning of our conversation, this idea of simplicity. And if you can get it exactly right, boy, is it effective. I mean, that song was, you know, an 8-week #1.
Yes.
Again, the first bunch of times I heard it, I'm like, this is cool, but really? And then you hear it, you know, the next 50 times, I'm like, this is amazing. So
good.
It's amazing. Yes. But people think of that as and it fades out too. So it's one of the few big hits recently with a fade out where it's like, oh, it just kind of keeps going. And the idea is to make it keep going. And I think anybody making records, I think at almost, I've definitely done a lot, and I see it with lots of producers. And I get brought into finish productions because of this, where people just don't have the arcs and the transitions quite right. And it's something that you as a mixer, finisher, architect, whatever the various titles that we can give you you're very good at and you're very tuned into. And it's something that I do as a producer. It really is about transitions and downbeats and arcs. I think it's a hugely overlooked part of the process for especially people coming up, but even, you know, A-level people that I work with where I'm brought in to finish stuff. It's a huge thing.
I think that making popular music, top 40 music, that is based on this 4-bar concept, this dance music concept, this hip hop concept, is an art to craft the arc. And most of the time you don't nail it. And by 2 minutes you're done. And you can't stand the next minute and a half of it because it's the same.
That's definitely happened too. You get tired 90 seconds. You're like, this is the best 90 seconds. And then 90 seconds in, you're like, I'm bored, I'm annoyed, whatever. And there's the 2 points are, when we're talking about arc, we're talking about the sort of the full journey, the full bend, the full arrangement, how it changes over time, how a song changes over time. And somebody said on there that somebody said a great loop can go on forever without feeling repetitive, and that may be true, but not for a song.
Not for a song.
Even the songs that you think are like earworms, like my other favorite one is "I Got a Feeling," where they do like 4 choruses to start the song, and
that could never work now. It wouldn't work now.
Maybe.
It wouldn't. It wouldn't.
But it still evolves as it's going. It still evolves. There's other things coming in, and then it breaks away, and then it comes back. I think there are, even the songs that you think of as crazy and boring and repetitive actually have amazing arcs to them.
Yeah, I think my reason for saying it wouldn't work now is my point bringing up this. By the time 2 minutes hits, the rest of the 90 seconds people don't want to listen to is why songs are now 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah,
is that producers got lazy and maybe aren't even capable or interested in trying to outstand the lack of attention span that listeners have these days, instead of fighting and pushing back against that in order to give us a compelling bridge and transition to another section that will keep us engaged for that extra 90 seconds, instead of skipping to the next song or swiping over to YouTube or swiping over to Instagram. Instead of listening to this with full attention, I'm still kind of trying to figure out in my brain, just for fun. I really don't care really when it comes down to it, but why are songs now 2 minutes when they used to be 7 to 5 to 4.5 to 4 to 3.5? I've seen the entire transition of these lengths of songs as a mixer, as a finisher, get reduced down to this, oh, that's enough. And I'm still wondering why. It makes my life easier. It takes less time to mix a 2.5 minute song than it does to mix a 4.5 minute song, for sure. But I don't mind mixing 4.5 minute songs. Yeah. So, it's just an open question. I don't know why. And when we talk about this in the arc, I think the art of keeping a 3.5 to 4 minute loop based record, 4-bar, 8-bar phrase record, is really difficult. But mastering that is Max Martin, and there's something about it that's really, because you're talking about these, like, another hi-hat layer comes in and it's actually awesome, and another pad comes in, or this arpeggiator comes in, it's just a little bit intriguing and surprising, and it's like, that's enough to keep me going for another 30 seconds before this section comes in. And I miss that in records. I'm trying to bring that stuff out in records when I get a chance to, but a lot of it doesn't have that sauce already in the record.
I would say that there's certainly more songs that don't have as much of it, but like, we may have talked about this, but a song like Mood with Blake and Omer, 24 karat golden, 24 karat golden, still has those, even though it feels like it's 5 elements, there's actually a guitar and a bass, and it widens here, and it narrows here, and it,
and that pre-chorus melody, like, that's enough of a change. When he goes to that kind of punk belty thing for a second, for the hook comes back to the more normal,
and the drums pull out, and then these are like very, that is a really well produced song. I think actually the Serban mix is great on it. Like, I think it's Manny. It's a Manny.
Oh,
it's Manny? I thought it was Serban. The Manny mix is great. It's a very, there's a reason the song is great, but so is the production and the arc, and it's a very repetitive sing-songy, tick-tocky song, but it's brilliant, and every moment of it has a little subtle transition change. How is it pushed? How does it evolve here? And it's subtle, but it's super, super effective. Yeah. So transition sound. Man, we have more questions. I'll hit people back on DMs. As always, come check out the Discord, especially for questions about particular plugins or, techniques and things like that. We got a lot of great people on there. John, cool. Love you. I'm seeing you, without getting into details,
Thursday?
I'm seeing you Thursday and then Sunday.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Same.
All right. Love you, brother.
Love you too. See you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.